if he could work a little more, he said, our society will be very strong. I want to see what I've done is made still stronger. Prabhupada's talk of travel, however, coincided with increasing weakness. He talked less. When Tamal Krishna tried to encourage him to translate, he replied, when I get inspiration, I will take it up. Don't try to force me. I'm going through a difficult time, and I'm now feeling restless. It is not mechanical. The Julana Yatra pilgrims were mostly villagers. Many were from Rajasthan. The men and women wearing bright colored clothes, and the women wearing heavy gold and silver bangles and bracelets, which clanked as they walked barefoot on the roads. The numbers of mendicant sadhus also increased, and they became a common sight, with their ash or clay-covered bodies marked with brightly colored tilak. The Jamuna had flooded in many places and was too swift for bathing or swimming. Thousands of visitors came to Krishna Balaram Mandir, which was now one of the most popular temples in all of northern India. The evening arti at Krishna Balaram was so crowded that resident devotees couldn't attend but could only stand in the back of the courtyard at the edge of a packed, jostling crowd. Some of the Gurukul boys would greet the guests with Hindi Bhakta Godhead magazines, each boy selling 200 or 300 magazines a night. Srila Prabhupada was glad to hear this. Srila Prabhupada ki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the 7th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 1, entitled The Supreme Lord is Equal to All, and this is text 25. Yan Nibado Bimano Yam Yan Nibado Bimano Yam Tad Vadat Praninam Vadha Tad Vadat Praninam Vadha Tata Na Yajya Kevalat Tata Na Yajya Kevalyad Abhimano Kilatmana Abhimano Kilatmana Parasya Dhamma Kato Hi Parasya Dhamma Kato Hi Hingsa Kenasya Kalpyate Hingsa Kenasya Kalpyate Yan Libado Bimano Yam Tad Vadat Praninam Vada Tata Nayasya Kevalya Abhimano Kilatmana Parashyadama Katohi Hingsakena Shakalpyate Yam Kilatmana Ladies, you switch the lights on. Yan Nibado Bimano Yam Tadvadat praninam vada tatana yasha kavalyad abhimato kilatmana rashidama katohi himsakena shikalpyate. Yet in which nibada bound abhimana false conception I am this tat of that body vadat from the annihilation praninam of the living beings vada annihilation tata similarly na not yaja of whom kevalyat because of being absolute one without a second abhimana false conception akila atmana of the supersoul of all living entities parasha the supreme personality of Godhead dharmakatu the supreme controller he certainly hingsa harm kena how Ajya, his, kalpyate, is performed. Translation, because of the bodily conception of life, the conditioned soul thinks that when the body is annihilated, the living being is annihilated. Lord Vishnu, the supreme personality of Godhead, is the supreme controller, the supersoul of all living entities. Because he has no material body, he has no false conception of I and mine. It is therefore incorrect to think that he feels pleasure or pain when blasphemed or offered prayers. This is impossible for him. Thus he has no enemy and no friend. When he chastises the demons, it is for their good. And when he accepts the prayers of the devotees, it is for their good. He is affected neither by prayers nor by blasphemy. Put by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Because of being covered by material bodies, the conditioned souls, including even greatly learned scholars and falsely educated professors, all think that as soon as the body is finished, everything is finished. This is due to their bodily conception of life. Krishna has no such bodily conception, nor is his body different from his self. Therefore, since Krishna has no material conception of life, how can he be affected by material prayers and accusations? Krishna's body is described here as Kevalya, none different from himself. Since everyone has a material bodily conception of life, if Krishna had such a conception, that would be the difference between Krishna. What would be the difference between Krishna and the conditioned soul? Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita are accepted as final because he does not possess a material body. As soon as one has a material body, he has 4 deficiencies. But since Krishna does not possess a material body, he has no deficiencies. He is always spiritually conscious and blissful. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchit Ananda Vigraha. His form is eternal blissful knowledge. Satchit Ananda Vigraha. Ananda Chimaya Ras and Kevalya are the same. Krishna can expand himself as Paramatma in the core of everyone's heart. In Bhagavad Gita 13.3, this is confirmed. Kshetragam chapimam vidi sabha kshetreshu bharata. The Lord is the Paramatma, the Atma or Super Self of all individual souls. Therefore, it must be naturally be concluded that he has no defective bodily conceptions. Although situated in everyone's body, he has no bodily conception of life. He is always free from such conceptions, and thus he cannot be affected by anything in relation to the material body of the jiva. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 16:19, Tadaham dvishta kruran samash reshu naradamam shipyam ajashram asuban asuris eva yonishu. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. Whenever the Lord punishes persons like demons, however, such punishment is meant for the good of the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul, being envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, may accuse him, saying, Krishna is bad, Krishna is a thief, and so on. But Krishna, being kind to all living entities, does not consider such accusations. Instead, he takes account of the conditioned soul's chanting of Krishna, Krishna so many times. He sometimes punishes such demons for one life by putting them into a lower species, but then when they have stopped accusing him, they are liberated in the next life because of chanting Krishna's name constantly. Blaspheming the Supreme Lord or his devotee is not at all good for the conditioned soul, but Krishna, being very kind, punishes the conditioned soul in one life for sinful activities and then takes him home back to Godhead. The vivid example of this is Vrittasura, who was formerly Chitraketu Maharaj, a great devotee. Because he derided Lord Shiva, the foremost of all devotees, he had to accept the body of a demon named Vritta, but then he was taken back to Godhead. Thus when Krishna punishes a demon or conditioned soul, he stops that soul's habit of blaspheming him. And when the soul becomes completely pure, the Lord takes him back to Godhead. Om Jnana Timiranda Shagananyana Shalakaya Chaksharan Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svavadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasali Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So nothing unusual. We've had this many times before. So Prabhupada is just hammering it home again. Krishna doesn't have a material body. One in the bodily conception will not be able to understand Krishna. And so therefore that may put us in a little bit of a fix, because we may be trying to understand Krishna and at the same time be in the bodily conception of life. And then we may become discouraged and think, oh, what chance do I have of understanding Krishna? Because I think I'm the body. So therefore I'm disqualified. So that's one problem with the bodily conception of life, that it compromises your ability to understand Krishna. Krishna doesn't have a material body. So we have to become qualified to be able to understand Krishna. Krishna says, one who understands my nature, Janma Karma Chime Divyam, that my nature is Divyam, Chikva Deyam Punajama Naitiman Eti Sojan. He doesn't have to take birth again. So how far are we away from understanding Krishna? Or maybe we think we don't understand Krishna. Or maybe we understand a bit of Krishna, but only a bit of Krishna. Because Krishna is a big thing to understand, actually. But we can start trying to understand. We can first of all understand how much we don't understand Krishna. That's probably the first start. Okay, I don't really understand Krishna, but I would like to understand Krishna. So we start from there. So somebody else, an atheist, would say, I don't understand Krishna, therefore I don't believe he exists. But that's not necessarily a logical conclusion. If you don't understand something, that doesn't mean you have to conclude that it doesn't exist. It could do, if it fitted in with your agenda of not having a God in your life. But it could also be, okay, this is a challenge. If I can understand Krishna, then I'll see Krishna. Okay, I'll take up the challenge. So if you take up the challenge, whether you're successful or not will depend on how determined you are. And how determined you are will depend on how intelligent you are. A person that has great determination is a person that has good intelligence. When they say sometimes, I just can't determine what to do. So if you can't determine what to do, it means your intelligence is weak. And if you have strong determination, then your intelligence is strong. So sometimes a person may be very clever, but because his mind is strong, it overrides his intelligence. And instead of doing what he knows he should do, he gives in, he succumbs to the mind. And so though he has intelligence, the intelligence is ruined because he's undisciplined. And this is where the educational system is going really wrong. That's why you'll notice the Indians do really well, because they know how to be disciplined. They've been brought up in the Vedic culture. So when they study, and they end up being the doctors and the engineers. And all our lot are getting intoxicated and having girlfriends, and they're totally like distracted. And at the end of the, how many years is the studying, you know, our guys are, end up going back into the educational system sometimes just because they can't face going into real life and working. But if you're disciplined and focused, then that intelligence can be good. But for intelligence to be really accessed properly, it needs to be strong into determination. And determination means discipline, focus, regimented, rigorous, unrelenting, persistent adherence to commitment and accountability. These are all dirty words now, actually. People do not like to hear. Accountable. Oh, it's not my fault. I'm just, everybody else's fault. So, yeah, for the educational system to really work, there has to be discipline, there has to be training there. And that's why in the Vedic system, the brahmacharya, he would be celibate. There would be no association with women, and he would be very, very focused, very controlled. And then if he entered into married life after that, he would be a good man. Somebody was just giving a class, actually, Abhiram, in Hungary, Prabhupada disciple. And he said, the problem with Kali Yuga is there aren't any men. There's no men. That's why all the women are feeling confused and unprotected, because the children are not being trained to become men. So there we go. Anyway, being covered by a material body. Interesting, isn't it? If you're being covered by a material body, it's almost like you're being suffocated. It's like going up to a person in the street, pushing him on the ground and throwing a load of blankets over him and saying, how does that feel? And all you can hear is, he's muffled. So you're covered by a material body. It's been thrown on top of you, and you're covered by this material body. Somewhere underneath all those layers, there's you, the soul, and you're covered. The senses, the mind, false ego, earth, water, fire, air, ether, they're all covering you. You're underneath. So you have to uncover the soul and bring it back out. And because of that, they're thinking that when the body is finished, everything is finished. So if we look at mental health, the real problem with mental health is that people are in a situation which is temporary, and because of that, it creates instability. And because they're thinking that after this life there's nothing, then it creates anxiety and fear. And they may not be directly aware of that, but that's what's going on subconsciously. And when we become aware that we're eternal, that we've always existed, and that we always do exist, then you've really reduced your mental health problems considerably. If you can just become aware of the eternality of the soul and the difference between you and the body. Because all your problems, all your worries, all your anxieties are all about the body. If you're not the body, what a relief, Driving along in a car and the headlamp comes off, then the tire bursts, and then someone scratches your bonnet with a fork, and you're in so much anxiety, and then somebody gets you to roll down the window and says, you're not that car. What? You're not the car. Get out the car. Leave the car. Come with me. I've got a better car. Really? Yeah. And it's like, wow, what a relief. I'm not the car. I'm not the body. So that's a bodily conception. And the conception is due to the false ego. It's the false ego that causes us to have conceptions. So we have the wrong conception because we're being influenced by a false sense of who we are. So if you're at a fancy dress party and someone super glues the mask on you and you're thinking you're Napoleon Bonaparte and you've got a face that looks just like his, and you're going around And you don't know who you are, and you don't know who anybody else is at the fancy dress party. So the guru comes along, and he taps you on the shoulder and he says, "You're not Napoleon Bonaparte." No, no. That was just in this lifetime, but actually you're somebody different. So that's what the guru does. He helps you to become free from the fancy dress. So Krishna doesn't possess a material body. I just heard actually an interesting thing Keshav Maharaj was saying about Krishna. He says these guys that are chess players, the best ones are able to think 3 moves ahead. So when they're playing chess, they're already thinking, if he does that, I'll do that. And then if he does that, I'll do that. And if he does that, I'll do that. So they're 3 moves ahead. But he was saying Krishna is 100 moves ahead. He's got it all worked out beforehand. He knows everything that's in the past and in the present, and he knows everything that's happening in the future. He already knows it. He knows what's going to happen already. Amazing, huh? That's Krishna. And then we're trying to apply our conception of how we are to how Krishna must be. So it's not going to work because it's inconceivable to have a consciousness that's aware of past, present, and future of everything simultaneously, unlimitedly, is inconceivable. It's just the amount of information, to be able to process that amount of information is just overwhelming. How somebody could do that, you know. And so then sometimes meditators conclude, well, this supreme thing that's there, it can't actually be a person like us. It must be like a kind of blob, and it just kind of spreads out everywhere, and it's just like, you know, that's what it must be, because it couldn't be like us, because that's impossible, you know. So Krishna can expand himself as the Paramatma in the core of everyone's heart. Therefore, it must be naturally concluded that he has no defective bodily conceptions. So you may say, oh, I don't believe in God, but at least let's understand what it is you're not believing in. If you say you don't believe in God, well, what do you mean by that? And then you'll find out, well, I don't believe in this guy. He's kind of like a Father Christmas, but he's a bit spaced out, and he seems to help some people, but really good people end up getting run over by a car, and bad things are happening to good people. So he's like this kind of bungling, incompetent Father Christmas guy that gives people nice things, but then he gets angry really easy, and so they say, well, I don't believe that. Well, that's fine. Nobody believes that because it's not true. But when you say you don't believe God, do you really understand what you mean when you say God? If you understood what it is, what God is, then maybe you would believe in him, you know. I don't believe in somebody that when you do something wrong, he sends you to hell forever, who makes a creation where over 90% will be doomed to an eternal lake of fire, and only his 10% are running around in gardens, having a great time on the clouds, and 90% of them are writhing around in hell forever. Okay, maybe I don't believe that. And then if God is all-knowing, why would he create knowing that this living entity will be doomed eventually to stay in hell forever? Why would he even bother creating him? Tam aham dvishata kruran. Those who are envious and mischievous are cast down into demoniac species of life. But that's not bad, because then after they've been cast down, if they're saying Krishna is bad, because they've said Krishna so many times, they go and suffer one lifetime in a lower species, but then they get liberated in the next life. So that's reassuring. Blaspheming the Supreme Lord or his devotee is not good. But Krishna steps in and he helps, like with Vritasura, who offended Lord Shiva. Actually, it wasn't Lord Shiva that was offended, it was Parvati. Lord Shiva just took it as a joke. Any questions or comments? Yes, as usual. It's very convincing, isn't it? Well, are we this mind? It's like we're not this hand, but at the same time we do have a hand. Well, depending on what we are in the spiritual world. But there's a chance that we have a hand. So you could also say there is a mind. We do have a mind. But what we have right now, what we're identifying with, is a mind that's been covered. Like you could say, you could put a glove over you and say, I don't have a hand because it's a glove. But we know you're wearing the glove. We know if we take the glove off, the real hand's there. So you have a mind, and it's wearing a material mind. Because in the spiritual world, they think about things, because they do have minds, but they have spiritual minds. But we have a mind that's been covered by the material energy. So how would you know the difference? Well, what you do, you go to bed at 6 o'clock, you get up at midnight, and you chant till 8 o'clock. You do 64 rounds. And after you chanted 64 rounds, then you find that voice that was shouting at you all the time saying, I want to do this, I don't want to do that, it becomes very, very quiet. It's just like a little squeaky voice. Could we do this? Can we do that? The mind becomes reduced in volume, and in the consciousness, you become aware that the mind is something separate from you. And the mind doesn't demand, it suggests. Because the nature of the Maha Mantra is, the more you chant it, the more it beats the mind down, beats it down, beats it down, beats it down, to the point where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, beat the mind at night with a stick and beat it in the morning with a shoe. Just beat it, beat it, beat it. And then by beating the mind down, it becomes much weaker, and then it suggests, it doesn't demand anymore. Vacha Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, all the influences of the mind, anger, lust, greed, these are all very loud. But Vacha Vegam, if you can control them, then you become qualified to make disciples all over the world. So the point is that, not that we control the mind, and that's great, now I can just take it easy and just look at the sky and have a great time and have a sweet bowl. And I've controlled the mind, Haribol. As soon as you control the mind, you've got to go and be a guru, you've got to go and help others. As soon as you realize you're not the person in the fancy dress party, then you have to go and help everybody else to realize that they're not these fancy dress characters that they think they are. So as soon as you control the mind, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, immediately you have the duty to go and help others. Prativim Shishishat, you have to become Guru and make disciples all over the world. And that's what the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is. Come here, we'll show you how to control your mind, and then go there and be a Guru and show others to do the same. That's all it is. And if you're thinking, oh, I just want to be, Krishna conscious and have the Sunday feast and go to Janmashtami and Haribol and have a carefree life and then just float back to Godhead. But the whole point is that we're being trained to become gurus. It's an epidemic. Material energy is heavy, heavy, heavy. What's going on right now is we're in a state of emergency. So we need to get trained up. We may not move into the temple. We may be at home. We may have our jobs. But we need to become trained up and become aware that we're not the bodies, control the mind, make it our friend, and then go and share this with others. Yes, Prabhu. What's your name, Prabhu? Ritesh.
Is there any difference between suppose I chant Hare Krishna and Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya? I'm not able to understand what is the difference between.
Well, in the previous age, we're in Kali right now. There's the 4 yugas. So in every yuga, there's a mantra which is recommended. So in Dwapara Yuga, the mantra was Ugram Vira Mahavijnam Jvalantam Sarvatamakam Nisingam Vishanam Mandaram Mrityu Mrityu Namamyaham. It was the mantra for Lord Nrsingadev's mercy. That was in Dwapara Yuga. In Kali Yuga, the incarnation who comes down to start the Yuga Dharma is Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya wanted us to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. And then to chant Hare Krishna is not so easy, actually. You need the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. So that's why before we chant Jai Shri Krishna, Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda. And that's the doorway into the mantra. And then the mantra is dancing with Krishna in the Rasa Leela. This painting here, this is the Maha Mantra. This is what the Maha Mantra looks like. When you chant the Maha Mantra purely, that's what you see. Shishikonitai Maya Pashashiki Jai. So if you're chanting your rounds and you're wondering, am I really getting into it today? You'll know when you're getting into it because you'll be dancing in the Rasa Leela. Hare is Radharani, and Krishna is Krishna, and Rama is Krishna. So Hare Krishna, and then they separate, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, and then they unite, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vipralamba and Sambhogya, that's what's going on. And so the mantra is introducing us into this, this uniting and separating from Krishna. And the Hare Krishna movement really is all about having a very profound experience with chanting Hare Krishna. If that doesn't happen, then nothing really makes sense in the Hare Krishna movement. It's only when you really experience what the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is, everything starts to make sense. So at least we should try and experience it once, even if we spend the rest of our life trying to get that same experience, but at least once, some very powerful, profound experience when we're chanting Hare Krishna. Then that seals our fate. Then we can never forget that after that. We can only pretend to be materialistic people after that. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Pip?
The translation there, so is it correct to say the things that people are so often when asking for prayers? Well, I mean, how you express that you know with the devotees to the Jesus or
Good question. Anyone have any insights into that? He's saying that Krishna is not offended or it takes pleasure if a devotee is offering him prayers or if a demon is accusing him. Krishna is unaffected. And yet at the same time, it seems that Krishna is affected because from the prayers of the gopis, it seems Krishna was relishing these prayers very much. So how is that? Why would that be? Blaspheming the Lord is not good. What is it? Sometimes he punishes, accuses, whenever the Lord punishes. Is it at the top of the... Oh. Yeah. How can he be affected by material prayers and accusations? Okay, well, what's interesting there is, and the qualifying word, he says, material prayers. How can one be affected by material prayers? See that? He says, because of being covered by the material body, everything is finished. This is due to the body conception. Krishna knows his body conception. Therefore, since Krishna has no material conception, how can he be affected by material prayers and accusations? So the qualifying factor would be Krishna is not taking pleasure, whether it's a materially nice prayer or because it's material. And Krishna says, Bina Prakrita Astida, he says, this is my separated material energy. So if it's separated, then it can't touch him. So whether it's a material insult or it's a material compliment, it's all material. Krishna knows that whatever they're saying it covered by the material energy, so it doesn't have any real effect. However, if the jiva penetrates through the material coverings and prays to Krishna, then it affects him. Then it touches his heart. And then he actually experiences pleasure when you're chanting the holy name purely. It actually gives Krishna pleasure. Just like with Karma had an itchy back, and they were swiveling the Mandara mountain to soothe the itch on his back. So Krishna's taking pleasure when you're chanting. You're giving Krishna pleasure if you're chanting purely. Otherwise, you could be chanting materially and inattentively, and that is compared to throwing arrows on Krishna's body. If you're chanting inattentively, that gives Krishna displeasure. So when you pick up your bead bag, be careful. You could be giving Krishna pleasure, or you could be giving Krishna pain. Yes. Yeah. 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 Bit louder because I've got the bell contending with it and the choppers. So
When we chant, when we do it for his pleasure, when we serve him for his pleasure, it's like we might not be at a spiritual level, but rather Krishna experiences that spiritual platform of pleasure.
well, generally, if Krishna's feeling pleasure, we feel it simultaneously. Just like if you're watering the root, then the flowers and the leaves will also experience the pleasure because they're connected. So when Krishna is Samsadya Hari Toshana, when Hari is Toshana, everyone is satisfied. Even people that aren't. You know, it's like in Les Mahego today, if we all decided to stay back and chant 108 rounds and do them really purely, everyone in Les Mahego would be feeling blissful, although they wouldn't know why, because they would be in the energy. They would be getting the mercy. In one sense, they are already, because we have 4,000 or 5,000 shalagrams here. So anyone that dies within 8 miles of this temple goes back to Vaikuntha because they're in the Dham. So that means they must be, the way they're experiencing things must be different than before the deities were here, you know. But if we focus on satisfying Krishna and pleasing Krishna, and we take the emphasis of ourselves, that's when Krishna can really reciprocate. Otherwise, we're kind of blocking it because we're trying to control. And it's such a tricky thing. That's why chanting Hare Krishna is a very tricky thing, because you could be a yogi in the Himalayas, sitting up there for 40 years in your Brahman underpants, and then one day you see the Paramatma. And what happens when you see the Paramatma? When you see the Paramatma, you think, oh, that's me. Wow. So when you're chanting, if the chanting goes good, you think, wow, I'm chanting really good. I'm really doing this really well. I'm a really good devotee. You're not doing it. Krishna's giving you some mercy. And when you're getting that mercy, if you can identify that that's Krishna doing it and not me doing it and not want to take the credit, I just chanted, it was me, yeah. I'm probably a pure devotee, yeah. Then you don't get the mercy. And it's because we identify with that mercy as ourselves, and then we take the credit, and then everything goes downhill. You could be chanting really, really well, and then even in the middle of it, thinking, wow, I'm such a good devotee, and then whoosh, down you go. And you lose the taste, you lose the bliss. Confirmed.
So in terms of mind and intelligence, so it's always the mind and material conception. It's mind always the negative part, and intelligence is always showing us the right.
The mind is the reins, the intelligence is holding the reins, and the senses are pulling the reins. So the senses are like the horses, the mind is being pulled by the senses, and the intelligence is, oh, whoa, 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 no. Don't eat that cake, it's not been offered. The sense is like, wow, it smells so good, wow, it looks really nice, it looks like it's got lots of chocolate, wow. And then the mind's like, oh, the smell and the sense of taste is taking me over here. And then the intelligence goes, no, the cake is not offered, come back, let's offer it first to Krishna, stop lusting over it, or we won't be able to offer it. So there's a bit of a struggle going on. It can be, yeah. It's definitely pulled by the senses, yeah. It's basically the voice of the senses. The senses want to communicate something, so they do it via the mind. And then the intelligence is like, And then sometimes the intelligence, if it's weak, it's, I just can't make my mind up. I can't decide, should I eat the cake? Should I not? It may have eggs in, but who cares? No, that's not right. I shouldn't be thinking like that. So we got all these different things, all these factors going on, you know. And then when the intelligence is strong, then you can, no, it's Kadashi, no cake. I get it. And the mind's like, okay. The mind's happy when it's disciplined. It's like a dog, it's running around everywhere. And if a dog's disciplined, the dog's happy. If you go into a person's house where the dog's jumping all over the place and pooping in the plants and biting the baby, the dog's not happy. The baby's not happy. No one's happy. The house is smelly. The dog is disciplined. The dog's quite satisfied, you know. The dog will never thank you for undisciplining it. Same with the mind. You think, well, I'll just do what the mind says. Maybe it'll keep it happy. There was one devotee left Krishna consciousness. It does happen, and he found himself in a rave, and he was on a few different things, and he said to the mind, "Well, are you happy now?" And you know what the mind said? "Do you know you're going to go to hell?" And he said, "But you said to do this. I was doing this because I thought you'd be happy." And the mind said, "You've read Bhagavad Gita. You know not to listen to me. You're just a loser. You're just a waste of space. But I thought you'd be happy." "I'm disgusted. You're a failure. Total failure." So that's you trying to please the mind. Whereas if you'd have said to the mind, "Nope, we're not going to do that. That is nonsense," the mind would have said, "Wow, that's pretty cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's great. You've controlled me. I'm happy. I'm proud of your son." So we want to make the mind proud of us, but we have to discipline if we're going to do that. Otherwise, we live in fear all the time of the mind. So the sooner we can control it, the sooner we get free from fear. Fear is proportionate to how much the mind is uncontrolled and how much we're attached. If you're not attached, there's nothing to be afraid of. If you're not attached to the body, then anything else, if you're not worried about losing your body, then there's not much else to worry about, is there? Everything else is a minor detail if you're not worried about the body. If you're aware that you're not the body. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
So, following up on the question around the Lord not accepting of your prayer.
Yeah.
So the last line says that in some occasions, yes, if your prayer is with devotees, it is with the own will or which is bad, which is against them. So is that also referring to the master prayer? Is that not in the
Yeah. Well, with the demoniac person, he's saying Krishna is bad, so that's quite material. But Krishna still looks at the positive side. So what to speak if the person was trying to be a devotee, but he was still very heavily covered by the material energy? Krishna will make plans for the benefit of both the devotee and the demon, so that in the future that they can benefit. But it won't be immediate. And the idea is, in ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada is saying, if you follow 4 regulative principles and you chant 16 rounds, this lifetime, you go back. And next lifetime is a gamble, because Kali Yuga is not getting any better. And at the end of Kali Yuga, the child will be eaten straight from the womb. As soon as the child's born, there'll be no vegetation. So the only thing to eat will be newborn babies or anybody else you can get your hands on. And the sound of a motorboat will sound very melodious. Men will have their hair long and think themselves very beautiful. A leader will be voted in who has the loudest voice. The louder the voice, the more chance he's got of being the leader. So that's what's coming. So we should be very serious about making this our last lifetime, and free ourselves from any material desires or conditioning that's there, so that we don't. Because one of our principles is no gambling. So if we're not gambling, if you're thinking, oh, I'll just take it easy and I can do it next lifetime, it's a gamble. You're gambling. We're supposed to be no gambling. So we should just get really serious about doing it in this lifetime. And it's the endeavor that counts. How many potatoes you chop, of course that counts as well, because otherwise you're going hungry today. But Krishna's more interested in the endeavor. Your attitude. What is your mood? Do you really want to please Krishna? Do you really want to give everything to Krishna? If that's your mood, then that's your main qualification. your attitude, your conception. And Krishna consciousness is very proactive. It's very much, it doesn't matter what the situation is or the circumstances or where I've been born or where I've been brought up. What matters is what am I going to do from this point on? Is my intention to try to please Krishna as purely and as much as I possibly can? So that's very proactive, you know. And the reactive is, well, you know, I would have done it, but you know, I mean, the temple president, he was really rude, and that devotee pushed me, and I fell into the halava, and that was bad as well. And I had a hole in my sock, and it was raining, and I shouldn't even be in Scotland, and it's terrible. And so then it's all reactive. That you've got, all you're doing is you're just finding excuses for being excused from getting Krishna's mercy. So if you just accept, okay, this is where I am. Everything is according to Krishna's arrangement. He's put me in this situation with these particular personalities to develop my love for him. Let me see his hand. Let me see Krishna's hand. And then everything's fine. If you can see Krishna's hand, everything's fine. And in due course, once you can see Krishna's hand, you'll eventually be able to see his arm, and then his shoulder, and his beautiful face. But first of all, you have to try and see his hand. And of course, all Krishna's body he's able to do the same as all the other parts of his body. So he can do with his feet what he can do with his hands. So we try and see Krishna's feet, how Krishna's arranging everything through his lotus feet. Anyway, it's a scary thought, and I heard there was one devotee. She's a very advanced devotee, and she was crying in the temple room because she'd heard that when you're chanting inattentively, it's like throwing arrows on Krishna's body, and she was chanting, and she was thinking, I don't want to hurt you, Krishna. I don't want to hurt you. And she was crying, you know. And as the story goes, you can believe this or not believe it, but Krishna came over to her and put his arm around her. He was just coming back from the cowherds, so he had dust on his body, and he sat down, he put his arm around, and he said, it's okay, everything's okay. So she was crying like anything. Whoa. But nobody could see because it was Mangal Arati, just after Mangal Arati, so everything was dark in the temple room, so she was just sitting in the corner. Probably nobody else could see Krishna either, but she saw him. So that's how we have to chant. We have to chant crying that we feel our chanting is not good enough, and begging Krishna for his mercy, and then Krishna will come and put his arm around you, you know. And then you know you're going back this lifetime. Hari Bol. Iskon Guru Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Gaura Premanandi Hari Bol. All of you,